If you're looking to buy a historic or an antique home, some come with restrictions, but what are those restrictions? Stay tuned and we'll tell you what they are. Hi, I'm Rachel Person.
And I'm Dolores Person, and we are Person in Person with William Ravis in Newburyport.
We specialize in historic homes. That's kind of what we do.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we do.
One of the many things that we do. You have restored multiple historic properties.
Correct. Yeah.
Some towns and cities have historic preservation restrictions. So why don't you talk about some of those things? What qualifies a home as historic and meets those provisions? Is it something I should be worried about when I'm buying a home?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is what is historic? So,
Right.
To my mind, a historic home is a really old home. It's a couple hundred years old.
Yeah, right.
But if you go to the city's, the Office of Planning and Development, and you say, I want to tear down this house. I bought this house, it's old, I want to tear it down. The determining factor is whether or not it's 75 years old. So that's 1940s or before. So if you're thinking it has to be a 1750s house to have restrictions on it, that's not the case. Fortunately, Newburyport doesn't have super strict restrictions. They do have a restriction on tearing down a house over 75 years old. If you went to the building department and you asked for a demolition permit for a home, they would first determine is it 75 years old. If they did find that it was, they would then say you're rejected, but your next step is to go to the Historic Commission. So we have a historic district in Newburyport. It's mostly High Street, South End, up to the North End, but really sort of central Newburyport. Those homes that are in the historic district, they have some restrictions on them. The most restrictive area in Newburyport is Fruit Street. Fruit Street has an overlay district and its own historic district.
So what is an overlay district?
So it's when they carve out an area and put specific rules in for that district.
And now Fruit Street is only a block.
It's a block. People think it's a whole street, but it's just the first block. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the last, I think 10 or 15 years, they put in a Fruit Street Historic District, which is just that block. And what that controls is it's more restrictive. So what the city's concerned about is really the exterior of your building.
Right.
If you talk to people at the Preservation Trust, they have a completely different idea of what's important.
Right, obviously.
They would say fireplaces, floors, moldings, anything
Well,
like
we're talking about what you're legally allowed to do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What you're allowed to do for instance, in Fruit Street, you can't change what's called the fenestration pattern, and that is a pattern of windows on the exterior of a building. The other thing they're very concerned about at Historic is the roof line. They don't want you to put a picture window in the front of a federal house. They don't want you to put a dormer on unless you keep the original roof line. You can see that original roof line, and then the dormer comes out from there. So that it's not really changing the streetscape.
Got it. Oh, so that's the side of the house?
Yep.
Okay.
I would always recommend before you do anything, you speak to the Office of Planning and Development. Jennifer down there is Jennifer Blanchette. She's a wonderful source for all kinds of information of what you can and cannot do to homes. So if you have the original windows in a federal, they might be 9 panes over 9 panes.
Individual glass panels, right?
Individual true divides.
Yep.
And you have 9 over 9 true divides, and you want to put in new windows. They're going to need to be wood on the outside. They're going to need to be 9 over 9 and true divide or simulated true divide. And that's up to the Historic Commission.
What they'll allow you
to do.
And you have to apply for this change? Is that how it happens?
That's right.
So you go to them and you say, I want to change, I need to update my windows. These windows no longer are functional, or they're letting in a draft, or there's an issue. They tell you what you can do? Is that how it works?
Yeah, well, you propose what you'd like. I have seen cases where they'll allow a window to be changed in the rear of the building because it's not on the streetscape.
Right.
So you'll see a lot of homes that look traditional on the front, and then when you go to the back, they open up with glass. That's because it's not affecting the historic fiber of the streets. What we did was we kept the old windows in the front of the house and there's a person called the window lady who comes in and restores windows, and she puts these little copper glides. They work better. They're never going to be like a new window. You, as a person, you have to weigh out what's important to you. What's really nice is a lot of the developers that are doing rehabs or new construction are trying to make them look like they've always been here. So you'll see a true divide or applied divide window where they
on a new construction home.
Just so they fit in.
Yeah.
So that's a really good trend. You'll also see the moldings. They'll try and match the moldings. they'll try and match the stairs, that sort of thing. So they'll put in granite steps instead of concrete because that looks better in Newburyport.
Are there any restrictions on the interior of the home?
Not usually, but it's always good before you buy a home to either have your agent or have your attorney look at the deed.
Yeah.
Because there are some homes, like the home that we used to own on Federal Street, that part of our way of doing that development was to guarantee a deed restriction that said it would only stay a single family home.
Yeah.
That the paneling would be protected and that the staircases would be protected.
Right.
The things that we see being torn out most frequently are fireplaces because they take up so much space, and staircases because they take up so much space.
And the treads are really narrow.
or they're treacherous. Old homes are worth it, but you have to understand that you are, as I like to say, you are a steward of that house. You are passing through the house. The house was here before you, the house will be here after you.
You're a caretaker.
You're a caretaker, and you need to respect it. If you want a new house that looks like an old house, talk to a local builder. They can build you something beautiful.
Yeah, right.
But trying to make an old house into a new house is pretty hard, and it's a lot more expensive, importantly.
Yeah.
Working with an older home, that's the other piece you need to know. So when you go to buy flooring for an old home and you want it to match your flooring, you're not going to get it at Home Depot. You're going to have to resource it. You're going to have to call. Reclaimed. It's going to be 4 or 5 times the expense.
Yeah.
Same with the windows. Same with the moldings inside. If you want them to match, you're not going to open the Barosco book and find a molding that's going to fit in a Federal house. You're probably
it's
going to
have to be handmade.
custom milled.
Yeah.
So that all adds tremendously to the price. If you love them, they're wonderful to live in. There's good things to be said for both old and new homes.
So I know some houses in Newburyport have plaques on them, like your house across the street at Federal. 19 Federal is the William Bartlett House. The name of the house on Fruit Street. The Tenney House, right?
Pearly Tenney.
Pearly Tenney House. Does that plaque give any designation? Does it mean that you're restricted from doing anything to the house?
It's just done in deference to the people that built it. Named homes are interesting. Are interested in buying an older home and you want to know anything about that home, we've got a couple great resources. Because of social distancing, we can't go in and dig through the records at the Newburyport Library, but in the basement are all the historic architectural records. So what you can go do is call, and they are so helpful there. They'll say, where's the house? And they will scan and email
pictures, all sorts of stuff, right?
Tax records, anything they have. They actually have the old census records that say who lived there and what they did for a living. That's super valuable. Also, the Historical Society of Old Newbury, which is the Cushing House Museum.
At the top of High Street.
High and Fruit.
Yep.
They have oodles of books and photos. Frequently, when people would pass in Newburyport, they would donate all their early photos to we call the Historical Society. And they can pull up and show you pictures of the actual furniture that was in the house. And you can get a real idea of how it was furnished. Newburyport Preservation Trust is a wonderful organization, and they can teach you how to identify parts of the house and what to keep and what is not really significant.
Newbury also has a lot of historic homes, correct? Would you go through Newburyport for all of that stuff, or does Newbury have its own?
Well, so interesting factoid. Newbury used to be part of Newburyport.
Right, yeah.
So you would go to Newburyport. There's more information in Newburyport about Newbury. The other thing about Newbury is a more of a laissez-faire type of community. So there are very laid back, laissez-faire?
Yeah, well, not everyone speaks French.
A laissez-faire community in that they, you do your thing, I do my thing. That's kind of their attitude over there. So they don't really have many restrictions on properties. The only restrictions are typically in the deed. And that's why I say we just sold a house that was 1646, early house. If you Googled it and you looked for...
It's a historic landmark, actually.
The Noyes house.
Yep.
James Noyes?
James Noyes house, yep.
There's a ton of information about that home. Surprisingly, there's no restrictions on the deed saying you can or cannot do anything to it. I would say Newburyport is more restrictive than Newbury. West Newbury does not have a lot of restrictions either. Amesbury, not much. No. Point Shore, maybe.
Okay.
Point Shore is a little bit.
Point Shore is Main Street that goes by the river. There's a lot of historic homes. We just sold one over there, Georgian. Yeah.
Beautiful Georgian house.
Yeah.
Point Shore has a lot of early homes. There's a lot of early homes in Amesbury. But I would say that Newburyport has more first period, meaning the first period people were here, which is 1600s. Colonial, which is the colonial, when we've been colonized, so that would be
Yeah.
the 1700s. And federal, which would be around 1790 to 1820. We had a federal government, so there are federalist houses. And when you say Georgian, that was because of King George. Amesbury, you're going to find more Victorian and turn of the century homes, some really wonderful arts and crafts period homes.
Yeah, bungalows,
Those 1910, 1920.
Sears kit houses.
Yeah, exactly.
Really interesting.
And then the neighboring towns are a combination of all of that. Anywhere on the North Shore, you're going to find some great antiques.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that this was helpful. If it was, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. There's definitely going to be more historic content coming
right.
from you, from an award-winning historic preservationist right here. Thanks for watching.